After Oak Hills Terrace, we moved on to Pat Neff. On my little bicycle journey to rediscover history, I was barred entry to the inner campus. I remember that these gates were put up while we were there back in the 70s after a bout of vandalism. But I did find the entrance to the boys' gym. This was my first class of 6th grade, and I can remember waiting here for entry on that first, very anxious day of school. Remember the apartments that were behind the school? They're still there. The more daring kids back then would go there and get soda from the vending machines. That practice was expressly forbidden. Back then, vices were a bit simpler than they are nowadays. But for the most part, the school looks pretty much the same. But it does have a new face when you look from the front. Transitioning to a larger school took a little bit of adjustment for my friends and I. Although the experience was, for the most part, a good one, there were some events that might be considered intense. I certainly appreciated the large pool of new friends that we met there. Most would eventually end up going to Holmes High School, but they would become lifelong friends to many of us. Greg Meffert and I were certainly fascinated with the large campus of Pat Neff, along with its many buildings and unique layout, especially the sunken courtyard. I can remember he and I imagining that it was an arena used for gladiatorial combat, and somehow or another we decided that our new friend David Heath would be our greatest gladiator, who went by the name of Flavius. An event that happened towards the end of our 6th grade year that would be remembered for a long time reminded us that discipline and personal accountability had risen to a completely new level at Pat Neff. During the elections of our class officers, Mark Nicoleski made a crack to our reading teacher, Mrs. Gross, that he wasn't satisfied with the candidates and he wanted to vote for Adolf Hitler. She told him to accompany her down the hall, and he was taken to see Mr. Carrington, a World War II veteran. Poor Mark had to endure Mr. Carrington yelling at him at the top of his voice, and the entire wing of the building listened to his tirade. I'll never forget the stunned and empty look on poor Mark's face as he walked back into the classroom. But in all fairness to Mark's comment, he didn't intend to make an insensitive joke. And in all fairness to Mr. Carrington, none of us knew what he went through or experienced during the war. But during that time period, popular culture would routinely poke fun at Hitler and the Nazis, and we were just too young to be able to properly discern what was acceptable humor and what needed to be left alone.
Hi, Reginald! You have the wrong map here, you silly old leg before wicked English person.
Sorry, mein Führer, I did not... Mein dicky old chum.
Lucky Mr. Johnson pointed that out, eh? You wouldn't have had much fun in Stalingrad, would you?
Not much fun in Stalingrad, no.
The vandalism episode that I mentioned earlier deserves a second and more thorough discussion. Although we knew about the concept of school vandalism, it was something that we didn't really experience while going to Oak Hills Terrace. I can't remember how many vandalism events we had while we were at Neff, but I remember that there were more than one, and they were pretty severe. It was a combination of senseless destruction of property, both public and private, and the theft of several band instruments. But for some reason, I was particularly disturbed by the defacing of the beautiful murals that graced the campus. When I was still in elementary school and would visit the campus at Pat Neff to see events of my older brothers and sisters, I can remember how big kid the place seemed, and the murals added to that perception. So when they were spray painted by the vandals, I remember that this really disturbed me. It was seeing the senseless desecration of something beautiful that really made me begin to understand the stupidity of such things. After one of the more serious episodes, the school administrators announced that there were to be some major changes on the campus in the area of security. As I mentioned earlier, large iron gates were eventually installed to seal off the inner campus. But of course this took time, and before that could be done, it was announced that an armed guard or guards would patrol the school at night. This announcement piqued the interest of my friend Carrie Holman and I. We immediately started speculating on what kind of security measures might be taken. We had little doubt that the school would be surrounded by no fewer than 2 minefields. Certainly snipers would be posted on some of the rooftops where they had clear shots of most of the campus. And of course, machine gun nests would cover the major approaches where they would have a sweeping field of fire. You can imagine our disappointment when a single standard security guard showed up. Oh well, you couldn't accuse Carrie and I of thinking small. But seeing the changes at Neff reminded me of so many other changes the city has seen. Who could forget going to the Buttercrust factory for school field trips? I can always remember how it smelled of freshly baked bread when you walked inside, and everybody always talked about the hot bread samples that you got at the end of the field trip. I can remember waiting in line several times at the Central Park Fox movie theater. You could always tell how good a movie was by the number of times that the line wrapped around the building. And of course, back then, the discount theater of the day was the Callahan Twin. But if anything in San Antonio is unchanging, it could only be the Alamo. In March of 1980, Mark Sines and I took the Via Bus downtown so that we could buy our solo and ensemble music at the Southern Music Company on Broadway. After we got our sheet music, we took advantage of the great weather to explore downtown before catching Bus 88 back to Evers Road. As young kids away from the usual neighborhood, we were having a blast just looking around the city and going wherever we wanted. Well, of course we decided to check out the Alamo, and little did we realize that we'd wandered right in to what some would later call the Second Siege of the Alamo. You see, on that March day in 1980, a communist group led by someone named Damian Garcia decided to stage a protest at our most historic site. He and his group scaled the building and raised their communist flag while they spewed their communist ideology. All the while, some of his other minions paraded around with red banners. You can imagine that the crowd was pretty riled up, and Mark and I were sure that something really exciting was going to break out, like a riot. But, to our disappointment, the protest incited nothing more than angry words and gestures from the crowd, which were fun for a while, but we soon tired of them and went on our way. It was probably best that no riot broke out, because as I left the area, I soon realized that the music that I had bought earlier might have indicated that I was a communist mole that Damian Garcia had placed into the crowd. The residue of this event would last for several years afterward, as the KKK would gather at the Alamo on the anniversary of this event to guard it so that no such desecration would ever happen again. Too bad they weren't there to stop Ozzy Osbourne in January of 1982. Bandera Road has remained somewhat stable. Although there's been a lot of changes, there's also been some things that have stayed the same. We can't take our kids to Kinney Shoes anymore. Gibson's? I don't think so. No longer there. But Randy's Rodeo, surprisingly enough, is still there. And I wonder how many of us were regulars there back in the day. Not far from there is the old Dibble's Hobby Shop. This was my place to hang out, and I still love to go even to this day. It's on Donaldson, which runs more or less parallel to Bandera Road. Fredericksburg Road was probably best known for the Wonderland Shopping Mall. Although by today's standards, it's a pretty small place. But back in the 70s, it was a great place to go. I used to go there a lot with my mom. After going there, I remember she would always take me out for lunch or dinner somewhere. There were a lot of great choices nearby. Across the street was Jim's, which is still there. Further down towards downtown was a Shakey's Pizza place. I know a lot of us have talked about this place. I always remember it was fun watching them make the pizza behind the big glass window. And also nearby was Pancho's Mexican Buffet. Carl Blesser and I always thought the commercial was so ridiculous and we hated it so much that for some reason I can't explain, we were always singing the Goofy song. But if these choices weren't good enough, Sizzler and the Little Red Barn were other good options. But you had to drive a little further to get there. When I started going to Neff, and during the summer vacation, that's when my parents would let me stay up pretty much as late as I wanted. This was a great time in my life. I remember Friday nights watching Project Terror.
Project Terror, where the scientific and the terrifying emerge.
I also got to know, during that time, the Channel 5 KENS, or KENS, news team. They had a lot of personality. I wasn't so much interested in the news back then, but one of the things I loved about summer vacation was staying up during the week to watch the CBS late movie. During that time, I discovered that I had a knack for remembering jingles, especially from commercials. And if you were unlucky enough to go to John Marshall with me and were in the band, you had to endure me and the tuba section singing this song.
We're the Clef Brothers, on a sheet of music we go right here. Mine are the high notes, mine are the low. My name is Treble Clef, I'm bass as you know. We're the guys who found how music ought to sound, and we say Alamo, music has the best sound in town. We're the Clef Brothers, the music lovers, we got instruments and low prices too. The Clef Brothers and Alamo music from us to you.
But if there was any song or jingle that indicated that it was summer vacation, it was found on this network.
And now, here's Johnny!
The iconic Johnny Carson theme always reminded me that it was summer vacation. Probably because it was only during the summer that I could stay up late enough to either watch it or hear it. Many times I didn't even watch it, but I could hear my brother watching it. So whenever I hear the song, even to this day, I think of summer vacation.